So we're going to start in John 11 today. If you were here last week, we talked about lost things and found things and about God's grace. And so we learned a lot more about how God sees us, how God wants us to come to him and things like that. So this week we are going to start moving closer to the cross. We are probably within about 2 weeks of the last week of Jesus' life, so within about 3 weeks of the cross. And we're going to start in John 11 with one of probably my favorite stories. It's probably a very familiar story to you about Lazarus. So we're going to start in John 11, starting in verse 1. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, a village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with oil, wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. Okay? So, John is going to set a scene for us here. We're in a little tiny town of Bethany, right outside of Jerusalem, about 2 miles on the other side of the Mount of Olives. And there's a family there that we know of, a brother and 2 sisters, Lazarus and his sister Mary and Martha. We've met Martha before. Martha was the one serving, using it as an excuse, not to be with the Lord, and her sister was at his feet. Well, this story focuses on the brother Lazarus. Okay? So, Jesus seems to have a pretty close relationship with this family. And when Lazarus gets sick, the sisters simply send word to Jesus where he is and says, the one whom you love is ill. So they were just letting their need be known to the person that could do something about it. Okay? Now Jesus is a couple of days outside of Bethany. He's a couple of days away. Okay? So they inform him of what's going on. Well, Jesus decides that he's not going to leave straight away. He's going to wait. Okay? So in verse 4 it says, but when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. And what we don't realize, because we don't understand the geography, is that when he said that, Lazarus was probably already dead. Okay? Because we find out later that Lazarus has been dead 4 days. So when Jesus probably said this sentence, Lazarus had already died. Okay? So he says this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Okay? So he says that this sickness, this illness is not going to end in death, but end in the glory of God. Okay? So John is making it very clear to us the reason why Jesus hesitates. It's not because he doesn't love Lazarus. It's because he loves Lazarus a whole lot, and he understands that Lazarus and Martha and Mary are going to understand this miracle. That he loves them so much and they love him so much that they're going to be okay with what's going to happen. Okay? So it is because of their profound love for each other that this miracle is going to take place, and not denying his love for them. Okay? So a greater miracle is going to get ready to happen than what could have just happened. If Jesus had left right away, he probably wouldn't have made it. But if he had been close enough to heal him, that would have been great. That would have been a fine miracle, right? Jesus had been healing people all over the place. That would have been a great miracle. But what was getting ready to happen was going to be an even greater miracle. Okay? So Jesus decides to stay 2 more days where he is. And then he wakes up and he tells the 12, all right, fellas, time to go. Pack up. Let's go. Okay? But they have some reservations about him leaving. That's a little too close to Jerusalem for their taste. They understand what's happening in Jerusalem. Remember, the Pharisees and scribes and everybody is starting to get really, really anxious about Jesus. Okay, they're going to arrest him. They're plotting his death. They don't want Jesus to get too close to Jerusalem. Okay, it's almost time for Passover, and then just a couple weeks of Passover. Okay, that means thousands of Jews are going to pour into the city of Jerusalem. Okay. But Jesus reminds them, my time is growing short, God's work is going to be done, and nothing is going to happen to me 1 second before God's timing. Okay? So this is what he's reminding them of. My Father has a timetable, he's going to do his timetable. No one's going to get in the way of that. Okay? So he tells them, it's time to go wake up Lazarus. Okay? So Jesus even goes as far as to say that he is glad that this happened. because not only is it going to produce more fruit in the family and in the people who see it, but it's going to produce faith fruit in the 12 disciples. They are going to recall this event, and it's going to give them more faith. Okay? So Jesus is saying, I'm glad this happened, fellas, because you're going to benefit from it. Okay? So, one of our guys, Mr. Thomas, who we call Doubting Thomas because of what happens later, he's the one who stands up and he says, let's go too so we can die with Jesus. That sounds like a lot of faith for somebody who's called Doubting Thomas, right? Okay? He's going, let's go to Jerusalem. If Jesus is going to die, we're going to die with him. Okay? Let's all go. And, you know, the other 11 are probably going, probably not such a great guy to get, Thomas. Right? He doesn't speak for us. Simon, where are you? Right? Simon, what do you have to say about this? Thomas doesn't speak for us. So he probably didn't fully understand what was coming, you know, but he is at least showing some faith here. All right, so jump down to verse 17, and it says, now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now it's interesting that John points out to us this 4-day thing, because this isn't just a specific detail. John is making a point here. In the Hebrew mindset, once a person, I know you guys love my stick figures, once a person passes away, the Jews believe that their spirit stuck around for 3 days, close to the dead body, hoping to be resuscitated. Okay, this was their belief. But on the 4th day, the spirit took off, wherever it was going to go. Okay, so after 4 days of somebody being dead, that was basically it. That was the cutoff period. You could not be resuscitated in their mind after that, because your spirit went on. Okay, so 3 days, fine. 4th day, nope, nothing's going to happen after the 4th day. Okay, so this was in their mind. It's been 4 days. There is no way the spirit is getting back to the body, because it's gone. Okay, so Jesus waits exactly the time he needed to get over this superstition that they had. Okay, this is exactly why John says he's been in the grave 4 days. Okay, so he's been in the grave 4 days. No hope for resuscitation. The spirit's gone. It's wherever it's going to end up. Nobody's coming back, right? Okay? So there's this large crowd that has gathered. And typically what would happen in that time is there was this thing called sitting Shiva. Okay? We're going to talk about that later again. But you would sit with a family for 7 days after they buried their loved one. You would bring them food, you would comfort them, you would just sit with them, you would swap stories, you would grieve with them. And the bigger crowd that you gathered, the more important you were. Okay? So kind of like a funeral today. If you go to a funeral and it's just massive and blowing out the wall, you know, the walls and the doors, you know that was a pretty important person. Okay? Same thing in this culture. More people that came to your house to sit with you, the more important you are. So we're told this huge gathering has come to Bethany to sit with the family and be there and grieve with them. So we know this is a very important family. Okay? Well, Martha hears that Jesus is coming. Okay, so obviously people would be looking out for him. We've sent word to him. He's supposed to be coming, but he's waited. Okay, so somebody comes and tells her, hey, we see Jesus. He's coming up the road. And she goes running out there to go meet him. Okay? Okay? And no holds barred with Martha. Just the first thing that comes out of her word, no filter, is absolute truth. Okay? If you had been here, Lazarus would not be dead. Which is absolutely true. If Jesus had been there with Lazarus when he fell ill, out of his love and compassion for Lazarus, he probably would have just healed him. Okay? So she is saying something that is absolutely true. 100% true. And she follows it up with this. Even now, after 4 days, even now, God will do whatever you ask him. That's how much faith she had in Jesus. Whatever you ask of the Father, I know he's going to do for you. Whatever it is. Okay? So Martha has incredible faith that she is demonstrating in Jesus. Jesus tells her, Lazarus is going to rise again. Now, in her thinking, she's thinking of the resurrection to come. Of course he's going to rise again. We're all going to rise again one day, Jesus. Don't you read your Torah? You know, we're talking about the future resurrection of all of the Hebrews, right? He's talking about just a couple of moments away. Okay? So Jesus tells her, I am the resurrection and the life. So he equates the power of life and death with himself. Okay? And while Martha is demonstrating this incredible faith, God, Jesus, whatever you ask of God, he's going to do for you. He's asking for a little bit more faith. Do you believe me? Right? Do you believe that I am the resurrection and the life? Do you believe what I'm about to do for you? Okay? Martha's answer is, yes, Lord, you are Messiah. Okay? So she is confirming her belief. This is Messiah. He is going to be the one to come. He is going to be the one to rescue us and save us. She goes back to the house to go get her sister because she realizes Mary's not here to hear this conversation. She's not here with Jesus. So she goes back to the house and she tells her, Jesus is requesting you. Jesus is here. Come to him because he can't get in the house. There's too many people. He can't get in through the crowd. Go to Jesus. And she gets up and she runs to Jesus. And we find out who the favorite sister is because everybody else goes, Mary gets up and leaves, we gotta go follow her. Martha left and nobody went after her. Right? So we find out who their favorite sister is. They see Mary leave and they go, she's going to the tomb to grieve, we gotta go follow her. Nobody cared about Martha, poor Martha, right? The crowd then follows her because they think that she's going to the tomb to grieve. Right? And we got to go with her. She's grieving. And we're here to grieve with her. So she's going to the tomb. We're going to go grieve with her. Right? So Mary gets up and she runs, and the crowd follows her. And when Mary gets to Jesus, she falls straight down at his feet. Her favorite place. Right at the feet of Jesus. And she says the same thing that Martha did. Jesus, if you had been here, Lazarus would not be dead. Very practical sisters here. Okay? But then Jesus sees Mary weeping. And he sees the crowd of mourners heading his way. And they're weeping. And he sees Martha. And she's weeping. And he has so much compassion built up in him. Even though he knows what's getting ready to happen, right? We have 2020. We know what's going to happen. But in that moment, he weeps with them. And this isn't just like, dramatic effect where the camera pans in and there's like one tear that rolls down Jesus' cheek. That's not this at all. This is gut-wrenching cries of sorrow and agony and deep grief that he has in that moment alongside the sisters and alongside these people who lost their friend. Okay? He weeps and grieves with them in that moment. Even though he's getting ready to do this incredible miracle, he stops and grieves with them in that moment. Because that's how important they are. Okay? So, he weeps and grieves to the point where the mourners go, wow, this guy really loved Lazarus. Because the more you displayed your grief, the more you loved the person. That's why they used to hire mourners. The louder chaos and mourning and cries you could get going on, that's how important and loved that person was. Okay? So for the people to comment on Jesus' love, that's how we know that Jesus was grieving very loudly and very physically. But they ridiculed him in this display of grief and sorrow. They go, he healed a lot of people. Why didn't he come heal his friend? He must not really care that much. They ridiculed him for it. Okay? He didn't come to heal Lazarus. Well, being deeply moved and not listening to those people, he asks, take me to him. Okay? Take me to the tomb where Lazarus is laying. Okay? And so they all get there, and when Jesus shows up, he's just not there to mourn. He tells them, move the stone away. And our Martha, very practical, right? She goes, Jesus, come here. I don't know if you've been around a lot of dead people, but he's been in there 4 days. He's going to stink. He's going to have a foul odor, okay? In the KJV, it says, he stinketh. It's true. Okay. He stinketh. Lord, do we really want to unleash that to everybody? I know you want to grieve your friend, but can we just not unleash all of that, right? So Jesus reminds Martha that she simply needs to trust him. Remember, I asked you, are you going to trust me? Are you trusting me, Martha? She goes, okay, do what he says. And he says, roll the stone away. Now I love this because Jesus takes a moment to pray. And he prays out loud for everyone to hear, and he thanks God for what is getting ready to happen. Okay? So he is taking a moment to confirm where's all the glory going to God. Okay? So he is taking that moment to say, God, this is going to be all for you. Okay? And then he cries out to Lazarus. Lazarus, come on out, buddy. And then everybody waits. Because you could hear a pin drop in that moment. Because they're going, this guy's nuts. He's talking to a dead guy. And then all of a sudden, in the dark, something starts moving. Now, I want you to note, Lazarus would have to shuffle to get out of there. He's like a mummy. Okay, y'all? They would wrap him up in linens. So he's doing this, trying to, could somebody come help me, please? Right? And he's got to get out. And he's standing there, and it's Jesus that has to be the one going, hey, fellas, unwrap him. He's okay. Right? He's not a figment of your imagination. Unwrap him. So they unwrap Lazarus, and they present him to his sisters. And the family's been whole again. And then the mourners who were there, they brought food. Now we're going to turn it into a party, right? So we turned a funeral into a party for everyone to rejoice because this brother has been brought back from life and God gets the glory and it's so amazing, except that's not exactly what happens, right? We're going to go down into verse 45. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary had seen, remember Mary, that's their favorite, not Martha, had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. And we really hope to put a period right there, but there's not, there's a comma. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So some of them believed that he's Messiah. Remember, he broke the 4-day rule. Okay? He brought somebody back to life after 4 days. Nobody's been able to do that. Even Jesus' other 2 recitations that he's done, they were dead within hours. This guy's been dead 4 days. Impossible. The other half of them turn into tattletales. And they go tell the Pharisees what's happened. Not so they can rejoice, so they can add it to the charges against Jesus. Okay? They are so afraid of what Jesus is doing because it's going to stir up the Romans. The Romans are going to get involved at this point. Okay? So the Jews are so afraid of the consequences that this is when they start planning the plotting and the murdering. This is when it gets turned up to 11. We've got to get rid of this guy. Now he's bringing people back from the dead. The dead. He's bringing back dead. No possible way dead. And the Romans are going to come for us. Okay? So this is what's happening. High priest Caiaphas, you'll know that name, we'll get around back to him. He's the one who speaks up in this little holy huddle going on here. He just has a very logical statement in verse 49. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all. Don't you love Caiaphas? You don't know anything. Y'all don't know nothing. Nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish. And Caiaphas doesn't know how true his words are. But he's saying, we need to get rid of this one guy. Otherwise, all of our blood's going to be on Roman swords. And it's better that we deal with him and get rid of him than Rome comes and deals with all of us. Okay? But, in his saying that, it's also true that one sacrifice was better than for all of us to perish. Okay? So Caiaphas doesn't know how true his words are. Well, the plot against Jesus thickens. Okay? And knowing this, Jesus retreats away from Bethany. It's not safe, it's too close to Jerusalem, and it's not time yet. Into this area called Ephraim, which we know nothing about, so don't ask me where it is. It's a couple of days away from Jerusalem, and we don't know exactly where it is. But he hides out with the 12 because it's not time yet. But the time is growing short. It's almost Passover. And this Passover would be the one in which he would become the Passover lamb. Okay? So, let's go to Luke 18 and verse 31. Alright, so Jesus is hiding out. Luke 18:31 says, "And talking with the 12, he said to them, 'See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and everything that is written about the Son of Man by the prophets will be accomplished.'" Okay? So he goes and hides out for a little while. Remember, we're within weeks of Passover. So he knows he can't stay where he is. But he tells them, everything that is getting ready to happen, everything you fellows are about to experience was already foretold by the prophets. Okay? Everything has to be accomplished, what the prophets have said. Okay? These prophecies are getting ready to unfold before your very eyes. Open your eyes. Take note of what is going on. Okay? I want you to open up your eyes and see. So he tells them for the third time, I'm going to die, but I'm coming back again. Okay? I'm only going to be dead for 3 days. Hold on to that promise. If I can fix dead, I can fix me dead. Okay? Right? They have to hold on to that. Well, I want you to hold that picture in your mind. Okay? We just had Lazarus. Jesus, the plot is thickening. Jesus is saying, I'm going to Jerusalem within days, and I'm going to die. And we have an interesting request that steps forward in Matthew 20. Okay? Matthew 20, in the face of talking about Messiahship, in the face of talking about the coming kingdom, in the face of his death, in the face of Lazarus, verse 20 of chapter 20, Matthew 20, "Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, 'What do you want?'" I love Jesus. He's so practical. "What do you want?" She said to him, "Say that these 2 sons of mine are to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left hand in the coming kingdom."
That's a large wish.
Put it in perspective. He's telling them, I'm going to die in a couple of days, but I'm coming back with my kingdom. Okay? So this mother is concerned about her 2 sons' future. This is Salome. She's the wife of Zebedee, and her son are James and John. And she comes very humbly before the Lord. I mean, she's kneeling at his feet. She's down. She's begging as a mother. And in Mark's account, we're told that it's the 2 brothers who come forward and ask. And Matthew tells us all 3 of them are coming to ask. Now, knowing a little bit about James and John, they probably pushed Mama forward, right? Because Jesus isn't going to deny Mama's request. Okay, Mama, can you ask Jesus? We really all want this. Mama, can you ask Jesus for this? Okay? He's not going to refuse Mama's request. Well, the request is this. When Jesus brings his kingdom, when he overthrows Rome and makes everything all perfect again and rules Israel, put James and John, one on each of your side. Now, that's not just a fancy term for sitting up there with the king. Those are positions of authority, ruling positions of authority. That's what she's asking for. All 3 of them have no idea what they're asking. Okay? Jesus turns to the 2 brothers and he says, "You really want to drink from my cup? You really want to drink from the cup that I'm getting ready to take?" And they respond all too quickly with, "Yes, sure. If it means we get the position, if it means we get the authority, we'll do whatever you ask." And Jesus looks at him, shaking his head and just going, "You have no idea what you're asking. You have no idea what you're asking." Okay? And he tells them that they will drink from his cup, but not the way they want to. Okay? And that the seats next to him are not his to give. They're the Father's to give. Which means that the Father is going to say who gets all those authorities. Okay? Now we know the rest of the story. This James is the first one that gets martyred of the 12. Okay? John is the last one to get martyred. So we have the first martyr and the last martyr sitting right here. Okay? Now, John tells us that he was the only one not officially martyred. He's not officially killed, but it wasn't for lack of trying. They boiled the poor man alive in a vat of oil, and he survived. Then they exiled him and kicked him out to a small island, and he still survived. The guy just would not die, because Jesus was going to show up again for him before his death. Okay? In Revelation. Yep. He gets to write Revelation, so he actually sees the vision of Jesus coming back again. But we're going to talk about Jesus' promise to John and Peter when we get post-resurrection. He's going to promise that to John. Yep. Well, this whole conversation is going on, right? Remember, we're within days of them heading to Passover. The other 10 hear this conversation, and they're not very happy with James and John and their mama. Okay? It doesn't go over very well. It comes to a head that they are arguing within themselves so much that Jesus has to call a conversation meeting. He has to have a literal come to Jesus meeting with them, with all of them. Okay? And he says, fellas, you're focusing on the wrong thing. You guys are focusing, I'm getting ready to head to all of this. And this is what you're focusing on right now? Okay? He tells them, stop focusing on the seats. You're going to be servants. Okay? He's planning out their future for them. You're going to be servants. You're going to tell people about me. You're going to be all over the world. You're going to suffer. And eventually you're going to die. That's what you need to be focusing on right now. Be humble servants and stop looking for seats of power. Okay?
Just be happy to be there.
Just be happy to be there. Yeah. Be happy to be there. Stop looking for the throne. It's not yours. All right. So Jesus has now decided we're heading back to Jerusalem. Okay? We can't hide out forever. We're heading back to Jerusalem. So Matthew 20, verse 29. Sorry, just jump down to verse 29. And as they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed them. And behold, there was 2 blind men sitting by the roadside. And when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. Okay? So they're walking to Jerusalem in order to go from Jericho to Jerusalem. Okay? And as they're walking along, and Jesus is talking to his disciples and telling them, stop looking for the authority, these 2 blind guys start crying out because they hear that Jesus is passing by. Thankfully, they didn't see him passing by, as the irony we've had before in some stories. They hear Jesus passing by. And we're told in Mark's account that one of them is named Bartimaeus. Okay? So typically when we have somebody named in the New Testament like this, they go on to do something great. So this is probably Bartimaeus, who shows up later in Acts and is one of the ones who is testifying of the Lord. So a small little role, but he gets at least named. So the crowd is trying to make these 2 guys be quiet. They're causing a disruption. They're screaming at the top of their lungs at Jesus, and the crowd is telling them to be quiet. But Jesus stops anyway, and he asks them, what do you want? Okay? Same question he asked the mama. What do you want? And all they say is, we want to see. We want to be healed. So he touches their eyes and he restores their sight. And they get up and they follow him into Jericho. They're like, we're going to stick with this guy, right? He just healed us. We're going to stick with him. Okay? So they go into Jericho and go to Luke 19, another famous story. Luke 19, verse 1. He entered Jericho and was passing through. Okay, so he's getting ready to go through Jericho into Jerusalem. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. And he was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Read loaded. Loaded. He was loaded. Okay, so he was the chief tax collector in Jericho, and he was very rich. Okay, so the crowds are forming again around Jesus. Jesus is coming to a very highly populated city, but it's also everybody's heading that way to get to Jerusalem. Okay? The crowds are forming, and this guy, who's the chief tax collector, everybody say boo, right? Chief tax collector can't get to Jesus, and the reason Luke tells us is because he's short. Don't you love that the doctor is the one that tells us that this poor guy's short? We don't know how short he is, but apparently short enough to where he can't get to Jesus. He can't even see him in the crowd. Can I tell you, Jews of that day weren't very tall. They were probably 5'2" max. So they're my height, the average Jew, and he can't see Jesus. They're talking about a little man. He's a little man. Okay? So, being this tax collector, very rich man, I gotta see Jesus. I gotta lay my eyes on him. Throwing dignity to the wind, he girds his loins, which means he would take his tunic and tuck it up into his belt, and he shimmies up a sycamore tree to see Jesus. And he's hanging onto that branch, probably dear life, because it probably has been a while since he climbed a tree. And he's looking for Jesus. And Jesus sees him. And he goes, "Hi, Zacchaeus. I'm coming to your house today for dinner." What? You don't invite yourself over in that culture. You would wait to be invited over. Okay, so Zacchaeus goes, "Sure, come on over to my house. We're going to have a great party. I'm so excited that you're here. I can't wait to talk to you. Come on over," right? Gratefully and joyfully receives him. But the crowds aren't very happy about that. Remember who this guy is. He's a Jew and a traitor. He's been collecting our taxes and benefiting off of all of us. The whole reason why he's got that villa and that mansion and all that food, that's our money. We're not happy about this. So Zacchaeus, noticing their displeasure, is going to make amends. All right, for anybody I've wronged, I'm going to make amends. Restitution and repentance. It's pretty clear that Jesus got into him. Okay? This chief tax collector is willing to give up anything because he's got Jesus now. Okay? It's an incredible story. So Jesus is not going to miss a teachable moment here. He's going to use this in Luke 19, verse 11. Okay? "And as he heard all these things, he proceeded to tell a parable because he was near Jerusalem and because they supposed that the kingdom of God was to appear immediately. He said, therefore, a nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom, and then he returned." Okay? "Calling 10 of his servants, he gave them 10 minas and said to them, 'Engage in business until I come.'" Okay? So Jesus is going to tell a parable here, a story, because he sees what's happening and he's heading toward Jerusalem. Okay? So, there is this nobleman, okay, and he's got servants. And he says, "I'm going away for a while, but I'm going to come back. I'm going to give you some money, and I want you to take care of this money." Okay? So, I'm probably not saying this word right. That's how I say it. A minus. Or a minus. Okay? It is equal to roughly about 3 months' wages. Okay? And he gives them 10. So that is 30 months' wages. Or 2.5 years. So he fronts them 2.5 years' wages before he leaves. And he says, "I want you to take care of it. I want you to manage the funds." Okay? He's going away, and he's going to come back. But he doesn't tell them when he's coming back. Now, the people of the land, beyond the servant household, they don't like this guy at all. We're not told why. Okay? But they hate this nobleman. They hate this master. So when the master returns, eventually, he's going to deal with his servants first. He shows up to his house to deal with his servants first. Okay? He's going to eventually deal with the civilians, but he deals with the servants first. So he comes to the first servant, and he asks him, "How'd you do?" Great. This guy must have had a really good, inside investment trading opportunity because he doubles his money. Okay? And he gives it back to the master. Doubles his money. The second one did pretty well. He gives them the money, and they're both rewarded. They're given authority over cities. Okay? Because remember where the nobleman was going. He was going to go get a kingdom. Okay? So now these guys have authority over cities. Well, the third guy didn't fare so well. He actually Doesn't have a good report because he didn't do anything with the money. He did nothing. Okay? He did not follow the master's commandment. Okay? And he kept it to himself. And the master rebukes this third servant. Okay? Even though he's still serving in the house, he gets all of his responsibilities taken away from him. Okay? Nothing left to manage, which means there's no way he can take care of his own things. He is then 100% dependent on the master. He cannot earn his own wage. He cannot buy his own freedom. He can't do anything. So he gets everything taken away from him. But he's still the master's. He's still the master's house. Okay? In comparison to the people outside the house. Then the master goes and deals with them because they've been rebellious. They've hated him. And in his absence, they were just ready to commit treason and go against this guy. Sounds pretty familiar, right? They had to answer to him just like the servants did. Okay? And the citizens were met with a certain and final judgment. He slaughtered them all. Okay? They were all slaughtered. So this is the future that awaits the two different groups of people. Jesus is painting this picture of what's getting ready to happen. Okay? Are you a servant in my house? And how are you going to deal with that? Or are you the ones who are plotting against me? Plotting my demise, plotting treason against me. Okay? So he paints this picture of the two groups. Well, after Jesus' teaching on this final judgment, the time comes. In John 11, go back to John 11. John 11, verse 55. So all the way down near the end. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. Okay? So this was ritual. You didn't show up at Passover. You would show up at least about a week or so before because you had to cleanse yourself. You probably passed something on the road. You've probably been doing some stuff you shouldn't be doing. You've got to repent. You got to offer sacrifices. You got to go get cleansed. There's lots to do when you got to Jerusalem, so you would show up a little bit early. Okay? So they, from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover, purified themselves. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? That he will come to the feast at all?" Okay, so these people are pouring into Jerusalem and they're looking for Jesus. Do you think he's going to show up? Do you think he knows what's going on? Do you think he knows about the plot against him? Have you seen him? Have you seen him? Is he here? So they start doing all of this, right? Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so that they might arrest him. Okay? So they've sent out messengers among the crowd. They're going to put eyes everywhere. See something, say something. Okay? See Jesus, come tell us, because we're going to arrest him. Because it's better we deal with him than all of us get hung for this. Okay? We're not all going down for this. We got to get him. So they get spies and eyes everywhere in the city. Now, Jerusalem's a really big city. Jesus is able to hide out for a while. But there's eyes everywhere looking for Jesus. Okay? We are now entering, this marks the last week of Jesus' ministry. Okay? About 7 to 8 days before Passover is at hand. Okay? Jesus and the 12 make it into Jerusalem. Okay? The Pharisees have laid the trap. They've got spies and eyes everywhere. And the Father's will is about to be accomplished. And that's where I have to leave you.